Hello, welcome back to another video here, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about Kenn Kaufman, who he is a little bit, and so I got some books and field guides here that I'd like to share with you for my collection. So, Kenn Kaufman is a naturalist. He's a conservationist, a very avid, a very, I guess you could say, professional bird watcher, and his whole life and career has been about namely birds, but also just everything conservation and nature. And he's done a lot for, especially in the Midwest here, and a big part of what he does is particularly centered around bird migration, and especially around the Great Lakes and everything. But he's traveled around the world. I don't even know how big his life list is, but it's probably pretty incredible, the amount of birds he's seen and the variety, especially too. So basically today I'm just going to go through a few books here and some field guides, and just talk about kind of summing up my thoughts, I guess, with each one, and why I'd recommend it. So he's a very, very prolific writer, as you can see. He has made several books here, and the way he writes is so passionate, of course, and I'm a little biased, of course, but given the topic and the subject matter, but the way he expresses his thoughts and feelings really through the books, and what he's really just into and passionate, it just makes you you can see the enthusiasm, I guess, of his passions and stuff pour into how he writes and everything. So he's one of my favorite authors for that reason especially. And so yeah, I think the first book here I'm going to go through is this one right here. It's called Kingbird Highway. It's one of his older books here, and I was gifted this about 2 years ago from an OCVN student or colleague I was with at the time. They gifted it to me, which is really nice, and it's probably one of my favorites of books in general, but also one of my favorites of his is because it's just like a novel about his adventures in the 1970s, back when he was really young, and he would just basically hitchhike and travel and do whatever he could to travel around the country, trying to get a big year, which is obviously, as most of you probably know, a big year is when you want to get as many species of birds in a single year, in 365 days, of course. And so he's basically just traveling, and it's just documenting his adventures as he recounts them all these years later. So it's a very good book. I recommend it just for, even if you just like storytelling and adventurous, I guess, books like that. It's great on its own. You really don't need to know too much about the birds because he explains in great detail, but still makes it kind of entertaining and fairly digestible to read as well. So very great book. I really like this one, and I'd highly recommend it. The next one here I'm going to go over is Flights Against the Sunset, Stories That Reunited a Mother and Son. And so this is another one of his older books. As you can see, it's a much smaller book compared to the other ones here I got here. And this one's basically about, it's kind of like about life in general, a little bit existentialism, also just, aging and the topic of that. But the way he weaves these like stories about his mother as he visits her during her, just last few years of life and everything. And he weaves it around all these bird stories as they, grew to be love together, I guess. And it's really just a great story in that regard. I guess a series of different short stories and stuff like that. But it's very moving, very beautiful, and the way he writes about his mother and stuff, and birds, of course, is very inspiring. So, very good book, and a nice short one. This next one here, a little bit of a newer one, and this is probably my favorite of his entire collection. It's called A Season on the Wind, Inside the World of Spring Migration. And this is one, if I had to choose one book out of everything he's written, which I think there's a couple more that I don't have here, I would say this is probably my favorite, just because the way he writes at large about spring migration of birds, and he does kind of center around the Northwest Ohio region because of Lake Erie and the Great Lakes and all the birds that move through, like McGee Marsh, for example. He writes it kind of through that lens a little bit, but by and large he just talks about the whats and the whys of bird migration, and just the way he describes this spectacle is just very fascinating and exciting, and the way he writes it and conveys it in this book, it's very, very good. That's all I can say really about it. So very good book. Like I said, favorite one he's ever written. If I choose one, just choose that one, I would say, honestly. This next one here, this is actually his newest one that just came out. I'm still halfway through it and I need to finish it. This one's kind of the opposite to A Season on the Wind, in my opinion, because it's very specific, but it's called The Birds That Audubon Missed: Discovering Desire in the American Wilderness. And it's a very, why I say specific is that it's basically about history of ornithology, talking about the greats, like of course John James Audubon, and some other, basically Alexander Wilson, a few other naturalists at least. And he's going through history and kind of retracing steps of how these birds came to be, really, and how they were discovered. And he kind of ends up, without spoiling too much, he ends up illustrating his own birds of, as the title suggests, the ones that Audubon missed, or ones that he got wrong. So it's a very factual book. It's still written in kind of a novelization way. It still kind of tells a story, and it kind of makes it feel like this, almost like a scavenger hunt, which is really interesting. At least a unique perspective to talk about this without, of course, being a really boring and dry history book. But the way he's, of course, once again, just pouring his passion into this book and his knowledge over the years is it's very inspiring, to say the least. So very nice book here. Like I said, it's a little more technical and it's one of his longer ones. But I think, as long as if you're a bird nerd or a diehard fan of Kenn Kaufman, or just, wildlife and nature in general, you'd probably really like this book. It's just fascinating to see kind of what in history, these early ornithologists got wrong, and the way he refutes it with, modern day evidence, and what species are what, and what they're classified in with their family and genus, is very cool. So very nice book there. So, but you can't go wrong with any of these four, really. So basically the last ones got here are 2 field guides. I'd like to get more because the Kaufman field guides are very well known. They're very popular, and the way they break down nature and wildlife is very good. So I've been a big fan of them so far, but I got these 2 so far, and they are the Advanced Birding Guide and the Field Guide to Nature of the Midwest. And so, they're really laid out well. A lot of the text and information, I guess, is from his own words. And like for the Field Guide to Advanced Birding, it really breaks down the anatomy and the biology of birds. Talks about plumage, different parts of, physical parts that is, of their bodies, and how to distinguish certain family of birds through others and all that. So very good book here. Like I said, it's very much more a technical book. If you're just beginning or starting out your bird watching experiences, it's a good one, I think, to maybe look at, but to really go through and thoroughly digest might be a little bit too much for a beginning bird watcher. But for a seasoned pro or just an experienced one, it's a perfect guide to kind of brush up a little bit more about specific field marks and everything like that. This next one here, as the name suggests, is a little bit more of an overview. It's a field guide to the nature of the Midwest. So obviously it's covering about 5 or 6 different states here, including Ohio, of course. And it not only talks about birds, but also just different insects, different wildflowers and plants, and other mammals, of course. But the way these books are so laid out is they're broken down by the type of whatever it may be, species-wise. So there's a wildflower section. There's one here for ferns and primitive plants, toothy game fishes, and other insects like skimmers, butterflies, moths, fungi, trees. It's kind of got everything in here. Pretty small size, so you can kind of fit it in a backpack or something if you want to take it out in the field. But this book is amazing. It's great to just be a nice kind of catch-all for anything you might encounter out in nature, or while hiking, or while photographing. And so, birds aside, it's great for, of course, the bird section on its own, but it gives you a nice overview and, illustrations are very beautiful and true to their detail, and the information is just jam-packed in here. So if you were to choose one field guide about the Midwest, I would say this one, hands down, is probably your best bet, and for an affordable price too. So I think that kind of sums it up here. So yeah, Kenn Kaufman is a great person to check out, I guess. He's a very prolific writer. The way he writes these stories and stuff, and kind of weaves it into history and more of a nonfiction and realistic perspective, is very cool. And if you want some more field guides, I highly recommend his. So yeah, I've yet to meet him, but that'd be really cool someday. Or if he happens to see this video, just want to tell him, thanks for all the great things you've done for both birds and nature, and for inspiring many with your books here. So with that being said, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and hope to see you in the next video. Thank you.